Tonight's going to be a straightforward, pretty quick one. This rig doesn't really work at all. This was built probably 2016, mid 2016. These are ASUS Strix, the triple fan RX 480 8 gigs. So these are bad boys are a little old. So I'm going to tear it down real quick. Some of the risers, these are older risers. These are like version 2. Say right away to kind of set this up. If you have an older rig or you haven't turned it on in a while and then you turn it on and it works, like once you update the OS, like don't mess with it. Like it should be good. If it was good then, it's probably good now. Don't mess with it. Let it run. Just check your thermals. Make sure that you don't have anything weird going on. Make sure it doesn't reboot or anything, and then don't mess with it. If you are having issues though, that might be the time to update risers and that sort of things. In this case, this rig kind of just stopped working. It still powers up, but we're going to break it down. Now these cards are a single 8-pin, and this is an 8-card rig with a single power supply, and that is achieved by a 1600 watt T2 from EVGA. So this is a really nice power supply. It's about a $500 power supply. I used to be able to get these for about $369. Good deal for a 1600 watt T2. A little dusty. So I'm going to tear all that down. I'm going to take the cards out. I'm going to inspect the board, take a look at what we're dealing with here. Probably reseat the processor. We'll pull this stuff out. Take a visual inspection of each of the cards just to make sure that everything looks good. And then I'll start with probably a couple cards at a time and validate that they boot up. Just since we have 8 cards here, there'd be four reboot attempts. This one looks good. I mean, most of these didn't get these were in a pretty clean environment. I mean, this thing ran for a couple of years, and I mean, you guys can see they're in pretty, a little bit of dust here, but they still stayed pretty clean. All right. So all 8 cards are out. Now, some of these risers were replaced at one point because this is version 6S. And then I have an older one here, the version 2 Molex, the old Molex connectors. All right, so one of the jobs is to get everything out of the rig, get a good look at it, and make sure you don't see anything kind of goofy. Make sure everything's plugged in appropriately. Get all your wires kind of untwisted. If you have like these little Velcro things, or if you had like zip ties, just bust them, redo it. And the main reason why you're just doing this and pulling everything out like this is because you're going to test all these connections back here. I usually go back and just re-pull each power connector, re-plug it back in, make sure it's nice and good and tight. You're just going through that kind of multi-step validation of all the components, because like a loose connection will like ruin your day, man. Like you'll spend so much time trying to find out why your rig ain't working, and the whole time you had like a SATA connection that wasn't plugged all the way in, or a PCIe connection that wasn't plugged all the way in, and it's very intermittent on the way it will present itself. I've just found a best practice of kind of reorganizing all the wires, making sure everything's plugged in appropriately. It will make your life so much easier. Memory can sometimes be your culprit, but usually that's on the boot up. So this has this looks like 8 gig. Yeah, 8 gig. Oh, that looked terrible. That's barely any coverage. Like this stuff over time, this machine's since 2015 or 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. It's not too much coverage there. It's just over time, it just degrades the coverage. Like, that's not very, very good at all. Who wants to come intern? You get paid in GPUs. Sorry, too far to travel. Out of work, got some time. Out of work, dog. Not good, bro. There's a pandemic. So next step is we're going to try the slot itself with a GPU in it. To do that, I need to take the GPU out. Z270 boards to where even off a reset, it doesn't allow me to see the onboard video, and it will not do it from a riser. But when I plug a GPU in the slot, and then I do a factory reset on the board from inside the board through the BIOS, everything works. It's like this most stupidest thing you've ever heard of, but it's going through its power on self-test on the board here. I still have nothing on the screen. We got stuff on the screen. Okay. So I'm going to turn this off real quick. I'm going to pop the OS out. I'm going to take the stuff off the screen. So this is where I said, like, it's all about crawl, walk, running. You go down every step that you can until you get to the point to where you can plug in a screen. I'll pull this off to the side for right now. A mini keyboard somewhere. Always, you guys can make a meme of me walking back and forth all the time. Where did I put the keyboard? We're going to go into F7. I'm going to go over to advanced. Let's see here. So CPU, this one had a G4400. I was incorrect there. So G4400. Platform configuration, all that's fine. System agent tool. We're going to come down here and we're going to, thanks that follows, sir. We're going to go into primary display and we're going to set that to integrated graphics because the auto is not working. We're going to come to here. We're going to change this to Gen 1. We're going to come here. We're going to change these to Gen 1. So these are the PCI link speeds. And we're going to disable that PCI spread spectrum. We're going to go into PCH configuration, PCIe configuration, and go back down to Gen 1. That's all fine. Thunderbolt can be disabled. We're going to disable the onboard audio. We're going to set this to PCIe because we do have a, let me do a close-up here. We do have, you can't see it, yeah, but right behind the graphics card is one of the little PCIe extra slots that we have for the 8th card. 2X is fine. There, USB is fine. RGB lighting, I leave that on. Sorry, hold on. Off. So here's the deal. If you have RGB lighting on your motherboard and you have a mining rig, what you do is you turn it off. And I'm going to tell you why you turn it off. Is because if you have a power failure and you have something go wrong with the motherboard, if it's off, and it's always off, and it's set to auto restart and all that whenever you have power failures, if you come in down to your mining rigs one day and it's on, there's a good chance that motherboard had got reset in some way. Like if it was a bad power failure and it rebooted and something happened and it reset your BIOS. Problem with it resetting your BIOS is all those PCIe configurations that we just set to Gen 1. If you have 8 cards plugged in one of these boards and we're going to get to 4G decoding here in a second that needs to be on. The 4G decoding is default off and all your PCIe connections are default to auto. With all that set that way, an 8-card rig fails hard on a machine like this, and that's probably your issue. So if your RGB is turned back on, it's an indicator that your BIOS is reset. So just quick tip, bros. So you turn that off, and we're going to go back to advanced here. Serial port is fine. Escape, advanced power management. So what we're wanting to do is we want it to power back on if the power loss is off. You want to have that on. So if like the power resets because it's storming outside and you're not there, you're going to want that back on for it reboots. And that's where it also will let you know if the RGB is on, because if the machine's completely off and you turn it back on and then the RGB's on, then your BIOS had reset. But that's the only thing you turn on there. All the rest of the stuff is okay. And then under boot is where your 4G decoding on this board is, and you want to turn that on. So you want to have that enabled. And fast boot's enabled. And you want next boot after an AC power loss, you want it to boot normally. You don't want it to stop or do anything crazy. And then we are going to save all those settings. That's a lot of settings that just changed, and we are going to hit OK to restart. Now, I'm going to let it boot. Yep, and that's seeing the GPU. Okay, so we are good there. So I'm going to switch back to here, and I'm going to take this back off one more last time now, and I'm going to screw the motherboard back down. We know the motherboard's in good shape, at least from a booting up standpoint. We know that it's at least seeing the first GPU. It means we're probably in pretty good shape the rest of the way. And there could have been a whole bunch of things that made this rig not work right, but we did do a hard reset on the BIOS. We can see that the onboard video wasn't necessarily working for us, even after all that stuff. So we're gonna get this off to the side here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the rest of the GPUs on here. Probably gonna take me about another hour to get this rig fully up, but that's what my issue is. I have good confidence in it. Provided all these GPUs end up working. What you kind of saw is the process, what I normally do. I'm going to change out the few risers that I had that were Molex risers to all the 6-pin version 7 risers. Put everything on there. I'll probably have to end up switching out that M2 adapter because we did have the spin up of that one GPU here, which just went straight to the fans going full speed. That is usually an indicator that that M2 slot needs to either be pulled out and re-put back in. I've also had to sometimes switch to the second M2 slot that's on there and make sure the PCIe settings on the M2 slot is set to PCIe because we rebooted a few times after I was setting the onboard graphics card, and there is a chance that that switched back to auto. If that went to auto, that's why that spins up to full speed, because it tries to treat it like a SATA M2 drive. And it needs to be set to PCIe for it to function properly, and to have it set to 2x, not auto or 4. So those are the only other two things I'm going to do, and then I'm going to put all the GPUs on there, and then I can have it as part of the recap of those last few pieces. But this is essentially, you guys got to see the meat of the putting and troubleshooting stuff, to where we had to take the board off there, we had to reset everything, we had to put a card in a slot, the setting of the RGB turned off, that kind of stuff is the stuff that I'm talking about. So yeah, this has been good content for you guys. So I will catch you guys in a